Just a quick question. Once you get your classification number, is that your number and then you're managing that number, or can you reduce the number once you get the number?
No, I think the calcified plaque is safe plaque, so it's not going to cause you a problem. So it's basically having cancer there that's in your, it's showing you, it's like cancer. It isn't going to, if you stop that growing, whatever's there is there. So that was okay. You're not going to reduce it. What you are trying to do is slow its growth. So the average is 30% per year growth. So if you can get it down to under 15%, I'm fortunate enough to be at 3%. And diet was hugely part of what, I just can't take any carbs. I just can't take any carbs, and that caused my major issue. I have to be careful on fats as well because I'm an E4 gene, so I'm low carb. And I suppose the score is really telling you what your history is. You're dictating where you go in your future, but so many people don't know where they are today, so they can direct their future.
We'll go ahead to Q&A proper. Maeve Craven, electronic engineer turned nutritionist, who now works with a lot of the nutritional problems that lead ultimately to disease. So a huge amount of experience. And also, Maeve, you can get various tests that are not commonly available done abroad and get those sent out as well. So nutrition side primarily. We have Garrod O'Lee, who's a consultant histopathologist. He's opened up a lot of people and retired recently. But another thing that's special about Garrod is he discovered a couple of years ago, what David mentioned, that the lower carb, higher fat form of lifestyle could dramatically change his health and well-being and body weight. And he began to study the science and discovered what I did too, that we've had things a little the wrong way around. David needs no introduction. And we have Graham, who's in DCU, a fitness specialist, and Dundalk with various football teams, so he's an expert in physical fitness. And as we've said, exercise and fitness is very much part of avoiding the heart disease milieu. So we'll ask for a couple of questions. Dr. Gerber is here, and is it working? Yeah, we'll try and get your voice out there. So Dr. Gerber is a colleague of mine. He'll be co-author on the book we're putting together, and he specialises in preventative cardiology, obesity and diabetes. And he has equally been on a low-carb diet for over 15 years, since he discovered the science long before I did. So that's why he looks so spry. Okay, so we'll go straight into questions.
It's open to the panel, so I don't mind who answers it, but the question specifically around diet. I was at a talk by the Irish Cancer Society a couple of weeks ago, and I asked about the role of sugars in either the avoidance of cancer and also in the treatment of cancer. And the answer given was that the sugar and carbohydrates have not been proven to have any impact on cancer, and to ensure that you have a healthy lifestyle, that you should follow the standard food pyramid, which says to eat between 6 and 12 portions of rice, potato, etc. a day, which is
this is just
questionable. So I'd just like to have your response.
I have been writing for the last 2 years to the authorities trying to get them to scrap the food pyramid. First of all, I did the grand rounds in Cork University Hospital last February, all on LCHF. It was full. There were about 350 people at it, doctors, dietitians, nurses, etc. And I asked the question, who composed the food pyramid? And nobody knew. And I told them who composed, and they were absolutely shocked. And then everybody agreed with what I said. I went through diabetes, etc., that you shouldn't be eating any sugar, preferably, that you should eat limited carbs, that they should be slow-release carbs if you're going to eat them. And at the end of the thing, I was expecting a lot of hostility. The first person to stand up was a young endocrinologist. He says, I agree entirely with everything Dr. Lee has said about diabetes, he said. And then he used the fatal phrase, it is all in the literature. And none of that rubbish about the food pyramid has any scientific basis. It is just a disgrace. I won't go on about it because I'll just get cross.
vegetable oils? Because
Yeah,
the majority of GPs will tell you to minimise your fat intake.
the GPs
sparingly.
know nothing.
That's what people
I would say to them, the GPs know nothing. I'll tell you now, my own son is a physician, and he has. I lost 40 pounds, which I'm keeping off. He did the same thing, and in the hospital where he worked, they started to mock him. They said that diet won't work. They stopped mocking him when he cured 3 diabetics, 2 of whom were doctors working in the hospital, who no longer have diabetes on this diet, and now they're starting to listen to him. And I'm going up doing a grand round there in a week, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, Maeve, actually, a
Maeve,
quick
yeah.
word on that question, because it's a pretty fundamental one, and then we'll move around on that question. It's a big one.
So because of my background in nutrition, I also look at the literature, but I also actually see clinical evidence, the person right in front of me, and whether sugar should be in their diet or not, and that's a clearly no. And I don't agree with the Irish Cancer Society guidelines, and that food pyramid should be 100% inverted.
Correct.
And we should be looking at like addressing, wholesome foods rather than like supporting propaganda or big brands like big food companies. So I feel very strongly that sugar should not be in our diets.
I love the one that's not an essential macronutrient. So
Yeah.
you'll die if you don't eat protein, you'll die if you don't eat fat. But nothing will happen to you if you don't.
I had absolutely 0 carbohydrate today. I drove from Cork on fats, and I'm going to drive home on fats.
If I would just say this is my barometer, I'd say blood glucose monitor. I take my blood glucose after I eat anything, and 4 to 6 is the norm. When I was feeding wheat, I hit 30. When I had oatmeal, I hit 35, and when I had a smoothie, I had 50. So I was hitting numbers. Now, at the end of the day, if I take any form of sugars, not just me, I go crazy numbers. So that is the diagnostic tool that I can tell you I use, and there's no doubts that sugar, the whole low-fat fad, was totally and utterly wrong. I think good quality fats is very important, but there are 20% of the population that are E4 gene, like I am, that have to be a little bit more careful on the level of fats that we do take. I can take, the good fats, but let me say, fats don't cause heart disease, but having too much for a group of people like myself, which is the 4 group, we do have a little bit more difficulty in converting them.
Graham just wants to chip in, and then Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff. I just want to back up the points made by the guys, because after 12 years as a fitness coach and personal trainer, first thing we do is we take our clients into an office and we discuss what they eat. And I've never had anybody in my office who hasn't eaten enough carbohydrates. Everybody who comes into my office is generally overweight. It can be on the scale from a little overweight to extremely overweight. It's not a calorie issue. Nobody who sits in my office eats too much. In fact, I often end up eating double what they eat during a typical day. The problem, I can go all out and say 99.9% of the time, is simply the carbohydrate intake, and that's solely the issue for me.
Thank you. Sorry, Jeffrey, the question was around sugar being okay and plenty of carbohydrates in the base of the food pyramid being okay or not.
Not okay. Did I hear something about sugar and cancer? Was that part of the question?
Well, the questioner had said at a cancer convention, she raised the question mark around sugar. Could lower sugar be better for avoidance of cancer and also for treatment as an adjunct treatment with, say, radio? And they said, no, there is no evidence sugar drives cancer.
Sure. Well, I maybe like to challenge that a little bit. It's a little bit difficult to hear, and I'd like to first of all say hello to everybody in the audience and the panel. Hi. Yeah, there's something called the Warburg effect, which has recently been updated by Dr. Thomas Seyfried. And this idea that cancer is a metabolic disease that is caused by dysfunction of mitochondria, the energy force of the cell.
Okay, internet connection problems. I'll finish off. Yeah, Seyfried has done great work, and the Nobel Prize was given to the person, Warburg, who discovered that cancer cells need to metabolize glucose. So they are totally dependent on glucose and anaerobic respiration. So that work never really got kind of established, and then you'll hear the kind of anti-science that you heard, Emma, in that convention. But the reality is the PET scans we use to identify cancer, you know the PET scans, and they show that big hotspot or where the tumour is. You know they do that? They radio label glucose, and they watch where the glucose goes, because cancer cells must use glucose for fuel. Humans can use ketones. On a low-carb diet, your blood glucose goes down and your blood ketones go up. Cancer can't use ketones. Okay, so that's questionable. Okay, I'll let you just comment, Jeff, on the food pyramid then, the appropriateness of the food pyramid with its base stocked with simple carbohydrates, bread, sugar and rice. How does that strike you?
Yeah, well, we think that was really industry driven, and the evidence to support it is sparse.
Yeah. Do you apply the food pyramid to any extent with your patients?
Sure, we basically flip it upside down.
Yeah.
I think you guys have made that comment that just over the years, the experiments to demonstrate that reducing saturated fat and replacing it with carbohydrates or these what we call industrial seed oils has really had no beneficial effect in terms of our health. In fact, some would argue it's had an opposite effect.
We could have driven our obesity and diabetes epidemics, indeed. Okay, we'll thank you, Jeff. We got someone else here?
First of all, must I say that when I see the correlation there between the calcium scores and the actual danger to your health, I must say that getting a calcium score is more likely to change my behaviour than seeing my BMI score or something like that, which is dubious at best. However, when you're talking about the treatment of it, I also hear about statins, for instance, which is also quite controversial. And there seems to be so much information out there that is all from reputable scientists and from medical people that just contradict each other. And so it leaves people like us basically in the dark, not knowing who to listen to.
Yeah, I would say that there is no doubts that statins, in terms of LDL lowering, which they're used for, is not the mechanism what their benefit is. But I understand the reservations, and I consider it like chemotherapy, right? If I have cancer, I have to go on chemotherapy. If I have heart disease, I have to go on chemotherapy, particularly if I'm in that 25% worst percentile, where 75% have events are. If I have an ill calcification score and I have a cholesterol of 14, I wouldn't go near them. So it really is, my logic is that, okay, if someone has a heart attack, we put them on statins after to manage the disease irrespective, and all the evidence is on that. If we know a stent doesn't actually help the person in terms of dealing with the disease, well, why don't we put the people with the high level of disease on a statin before they have the heart attack, if we think that's the right way to go. Now, I'm only talking about people at the very highest levels of percentile of calcification. I'm at the worst 1%. Do I think they're good for me? No. Do I really want to take them? No. Do they have inflammatory benefits? Yes. Do 70% of heart attacks come from plaque rupture? Yes. By taking a statin, I'm helping stabilize the plaque, not to reduce. I fully respect there's a lot of other people who would not do that. I just think the drug companies got lucky that the benefit was different to what they thought it was, and half the people who have a heart attack have standard cholesterol, and we're giving the drug, if it is to be given, it's been given to the wrong people. And there are negatives, huge negatives, but it's a matter of, there's negatives with chemotherapy, and it's an individual choice. That's what I would say, for those with very high levels of disease like I have.
We were going to have Sharif Sultan here, professor, and he was on his way up from Galway, and he got a call and an emergency back to Galway. So our thoughts go out to whoever that person was who's experiencing that, And again, unfortunately, we don't have him here with us. He has his own opinions on statins, and I think they've become a somewhat divisive, as I think you mentioned. They're quite divisive because there's a lot of data built up over 30 years. Exactly as David says, they do not act through lowering the cholesterol, and hence my references to LDL. There is evidence for a plaque stabilizing anti-inflammatory effect of statins. You know, so I think even Jeff, I'll let you speak briefly in a moment. Jeff prescribes relatively few statins, but in people with very significant disease, the balance of the evidence is it's a stabilizing effect. And I think also David referred to the downsides. So you don't want to be taking chemotherapy if you don't have a tumour. And that's where people currently are massively overprescribed based on cholesterol. And that's probably the biggest disaster with statins, to be quite honest. Sorry, Jeff?
Yeah, so well said, Ivor. So with David's point, if David is comfortable and happy taking a statin, then I'm all for it. And so I think there is a role for secondary prevention, and that's in patients that already have documented heart disease. And the one argument would be, well, does David have documented heart disease or subclinical disease? And if you consider, his disease on the, secondary side, secondary prevention, well, then there might be a benefit. And the problem, as Ivor said, is that, a big study in 2008, the Jupiter trial, was telling people for primary prevention that they should be taking statins. And really, when you look at the absolute risk to prevent a heart attack in healthy people, it's less than 1% over 5 years. That's not very impressive.
Could I say three things, brief things, because I'll forget to say them and they should be said to the audience. First of all, what's the evidence about low fat? A huge trial was published in 2006. It cost $500 million, the WHI initiative. Something like 30,000 women on either side put on low carb or put on low fat diets, eat their healthy whole grains, as they call them, peanuts, all that kind of stuff, versus women who had nothing done to them. And this was going to show the benefit of a low fat diet. There was absolutely no difference whatsoever in any disease between the two groups. Low fat diet doesn't work. Point number one. Point number two, if low fat worked, why does the area of Gascony in France, which has the highest consumption of saturated fat in the world, have the lowest incidence of heart disease in the world? Right? Third thing, you read in the paper about meat is bad for us, we should cut back on meat. The WHO say we shouldn't eat meat. The number one test of what's good for a population is their overall mortality rate. Okay? The longest lived people in the world currently, living longer than any country, are the population of Hong Kong. Okay? They live longer, men and women. They eat the most meat and they eat the most beef of any population.
It might also be said that these are not genetic mutants. If the people from Hong Kong come over to Western countries like America and eat the diet, they get their heart disease very quickly. So it's not genetic. We've heard that one too.
We'll try and get everyone.
Okay, we get another question.
Hi, here. Okay, a few things. One, it's really great to hear science challenged, but with that comes real responsibility, great responsibility, that's one. Two, I'd like to give a word of optimism and also a word of caution, if I may. In terms of optimism, from a public health perspective, when something is accepted in science, it takes roughly, or in practice, it takes roughly about 17 years for it to become word of mouth. So be patient, and to have a diagnostic tool that is good quality and highly acceptable is a really, really good thing to achieve. My word of caution is not to mix diagnostic tools up with modifiable risk factors, because that can be quite dangerous. If one person gets a low calcium risk score, but believes because of that they should not stop smoking or not become physically active, then that's a dangerous message to give out. So my word of caution is not to confuse or muddy the water between
Yeah.
diagnostic tools and the importance of those and the high quality and accessibility of those and the modifiable risk factors. So comparing smoking to calcium is not a good message.
It is rather sneaky, I will acknowledge that. I did make the informed decision because smoking resonates so powerfully with people as being a clearly crazy thing to do. And yet, the high score, order of magnitude outweighs it. But I take your point on board. I struggled with that, and in the end I went with it. I'll take it out of the next one.
I warned you not to go there.
Couldn't resist it, Jeff. Sorry, I'm just that kind of guy.
Jeff, I read that report, and here am I, a non-smoker, and suddenly with a score at 1,000, I'm looking and saying it just showed the magnitude of what it was. So for me, it put it in perspective. That was all.
Very good.
Check over the right